Hi everyone, it's Karen Williams again, and I'm here for the fourth and final Facebook Live in this series that I'm running at the moment, all about the difference between author and authority. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the others I've already done. You can watch them in the group below. If you're not in the Author's Journey Facebook group at the moment, if you go to facebook.com/groups/Author's Journey, you will find them. So do go, take a watch, and you'll find a little bit more about the difference between author and authority, the I, the T, and the Y. And today I'm going to be focusing on the why, you and your story. I'll be talking today about why you need to be in the heart of your book, but why your reader needs to be in the forefront of your mind as you're writing it. So you and your story, why is it so important? Well, whether you're writing an autobiography or a memoir or a how-to guide or a self-help book or a step-by-step manual, people want to get to know who you are. And obviously, if you're writing your story in terms of a biography or a memoir, it's very important to share your story, to lay it out in a way that your reader understands. And that's what I mean by putting the reader in the heart of your mind. It's all well and good sharing your story, but you've got to answer that question, what's in it for me, for anybody who's taking a read and wants to know more about it. It's all well and good sharing your story, but it needs to be relevant to your reader. And I've got some examples and books by the side of me, and I'll go through those with you and just give you a few examples later on today. So why is it important? Well, I believe it's important even in something that's not a memoir or an autobiography. It's because people want to get to know who you are. Who is the person behind the book? Firstly, what is your credibility? What makes you the person who is in the right place to actually showcase this information with somebody else? What makes you the authority, you could say, couldn't you? You know, what gives you credibility? What gives you clout? And sometimes it's some of the things that we've been through that have led us to where we are today, that gives us that authority, that gives us that credibility. It could be the highs and lows of the story. It could be your deepest, darkest moments, all those amazing things that you've achieved that you need to share with other people. You know, how did you do it and how could they do it too? Or how did you get out of a really deep bloody hole and actually do something with the stuff that you've learned on your journey? So that's something you might be thinking about. So credibility. So that could be so I'm just giving a few client examples, you know, how many coaching courses you've run, how many funerals you've delivered. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. You know, the fact that you've gone from a car accident where you were told that you might die and would lose your leg to actually then becoming a para-triathlete world champion. From not being able to conceive a child and how you cope with that sort of situation. How you've lost everything, but then you've rebuilt everything from scratch to achieve some amazing stuff with clients. How you've coped with your father saying that they wanted to become a woman. How you've gone through some real dire, so many examples I could share with you today, and I could take all day to actually share some of those with you. But the credibility piece, I believe, is important. But it's also about being vulnerable. It's about being real. You know, life is not always as rosy as it might seem on social media. We all go through experiences and pitfalls, and we learn lessons that actually, when we share them with other people, we can help those people to learn those lessons. So maybe they don't have to go through it themselves. Or if they are going through it themselves, they're going through it and they're going through that journey as seamless as possible. And they know they're not alone. And I think that's important, is that when you are working with people who are going through something that you may have struggled with or you've seen other people struggle with, it's that feeling that they're not alone, you're not alone. But it can be vulnerable sharing your story. You know, what do you include? What do you leave out? And what do you share with people that, you know, you're laying yourself bare. People will come up to you and say, I didn't realize when you went through this, it, whatever, comes out of it. And I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, when was it now? 2015. Gosh, that's a bit scary. I published my story, The Mouse That Rules. And actually, that was the most incredibly hard book to write. And it was actually the most difficult book I've ever written. But really, from my own story, I needed to share it. So on a credibility note, I never set out to become a book mentor. Certainly, it's not something I would have done when I set up a business 13 years ago. How could I do it? I had no credibility back then. But it was my book that I started, my first book I started in 2009, which published in 2011 was the thing that really helped me to build my business. So from the interviews I did with some amazing successful coaches to some of the opportunities I got off the back of the book, that led me to where I am today. And when I wrote The Mouse That Roars, which touches on part of my entrepreneurial journey, but part of my own personal story, it was really hard to write. What should I include? What should I leave out? And that's why I had to have the reader in the forefront of my mind, because I wanted to give them, some tools and techniques that they could take forward when they were going through difficult situations. And it's been a roller coaster ride. I've written 6 books now. I've helped dozens of clients with theirs, but I've also been through the death of my father. I've been through some amazing experiences. Back in 2013, I did the Inca Trail, landed up in hospital out there. Oh gosh, and the story of how I asked my now husband out as well is in the book. So that was hard. And I'll talk about some of the downsides of sharing your story in a moment. So I'll move on to that. But actually, sharing your story really allows people to get to the heart of who you are. And obviously Facebook Lives do as well, because people can get to know you. They can get to know you as a person, what makes you tick, what lights you up, but also how have you got through some of the worst moments in history. So what are the problems with sharing your story? So the first thing is it's scary. It's really scary when you're putting something out there for people to read and you have to decide, as I said, what to include and what to leave out. And also, if you are involving other people in your story, you will need to get permissions. And I've got a couple of examples for you in a moment around that. So you can't just share, if you can obviously include people in your book, especially if you're writing an autobiography or memoir. This becomes really tricky, because if you're including other people, it makes sense to get their permission. You don't want someone suing you for libel later, or saying that you need to take the book off the shelves, and then you may need to have to revise it. So that's a really bad thing to do. So actually being open and honest and getting permissions for the things you include in your book are key, especially if you're writing things that include other people. And the same goes for case studies as well. If you're using case studies in the book that can be easily identifiable, getting permissions is quite important. And that's one of the things that I work with clients around as a book mentor, is helping them to, I suppose, dot the I's, cross the T's in terms of sort of getting permissions and getting other people's buy-in to be included. Or if not, to actually word it in a way that is going to be suitable for everybody concerned, but enables the reader to get their message out there. Another problem with sharing your story is structure. How do you structure your book if you've got a story to tell? So I'll give you a couple of examples now. Actually, it probably feels like the right moment to do it. So this is one book. I've talked about Steve already on these Facebook Lives. Steve is the author of Don't Lean on Your Excuses. This is his autobiography. And the structure of this book is very much based around the turning points in his life. So what happened when he had the car accident, what happened when he, during his recovery, so the lowest moment and also the highest moment of becoming a gold medal winner, gold medal winning world champion para triathlete. Gosh, try saying that with the drink beside you, drink beside you. So yeah, this is his book, but we very much structured it around the turning points in his life and what he's been through. So every chapter ends with a little bit of a hook and a bit of a turning point and a bit of a, actually, we really need to read on. But this informs his keynote speaking and things he does in his business. So it's very much got a business focus, which I think is important. So that's Steve's book. I've also got Kath's book here, Kath Lloyd. Kath, in her book, the way she's written her book in terms of structure is the first part of the book is very much around her personal journey. So what happened when her dad called her into his office and said, I wanted to become a woman. And how she went through that heart-wrenching journey to go through it. But what she's also done is Kath is a life coach, and she wanted to include some real narrative of what people can do when you're going through any distressing time in your life or any stressful situation. She works a lot around sort of stress management, and for her book she really wanted to go into some of the activities and exercises that have helped her. So that's how she structured her book. Claire Brumby, I've mentioned her book, I've not got it to hand now. But every chapter in her book starts with her story and then the narrative, what you can do when you're in that stage in your setting up a business. I've got another one here. This is Kevin Stansfield, The Big Dipper. This is slightly different because it's not so much about his story, but this is written in a parable. So it's based loosely around his father's story of meeting a guy in a pub and buying a business and the highs and lows of that journey. Very much business related with loads of tools, hints and tips. Very well structured book, actually. This is one of the first ones that we did for about 4 years ago now, actually. A very well structured book that is a different type of story. And I've got Mary Nonde's book. She's speaking at the Author's Journey event on Friday evening about her story. And she talks in the front of her book about how she went through the lowest of the lows, pretty much lost everything, and how she rebuilt her life again. But it's very much around, people want to get to know who she is, but it's very reader centric in terms of, focusing on what the reader's going to get from it, and how what Mary learned on her journey enables her to do what she does now. I've got another story I'm going to share with you in a second. I think that leads me on to saying that when you are writing your story, it does need to go, as I said, very much reader-centric, so very much with the reader in the forefront of your mind. In the past, I've been asked to help people who've written books which don't have the reader in mind. So maybe they're drama-filled, or they're written from a place of blame, and they're written from a place of accusation. And actually, for me, that doesn't serve the reader. It needs to serve the reader, and it also needs to serve you. If you're writing a book to get back at other people, it's not something that we work with. I wish you all the best if that's your type of book, but actually it very much has to come from that heart-centered place, I suppose you could say. But sometimes you just need to tell your story. And I do find with some clients is they have to write their story, even if it doesn't get published. You have to get it out of your head and down on paper, and you need to get a few people to read it. This is something Cheryl Andrews talks about quite a lot. And she works with a lot of clients who are going through, especially those who are writing their autobiography, because actually when you are going back into the past, it can be really tough. And she's worked with a couple of clients to really help them to go through those tough times and to anchor themselves back in the present. So that's why we work as a great partnership, and we run the Author's Journey group, and also we run the networking event as well. So yeah, just something to think about when you are sharing your story. It can be bloody tough going through those times of the darkest moments when you have to relive it. Certainly in Steve's book, I know he went through that, and with other clients, it's really tough to come through the other side. The other thing when it comes to stories, I couldn't lay my hand on her book today, is Leslie Pine, Finding Joy Beyond Childlessness. And I've alluded to Leslie right at the very beginning. And with Leslie's book, she drew on other people's stories. So I think I mentioned it yesterday, or the one on Friday. She had a lot of people who had been interviewed for her blog, and she used their stories, obviously with their permission, in her book, just to bring it alive on top of her story. So one more example, and this wasn't going to be in today's Facebook Live, but I met this guy this morning. So Paul came to work with myself and the Librotas team around about a year ago. I think it was last summer. He had been turned down by multiple publishers to publish his book. It's a real labour of love, and it's slightly different from other books we work with. So I work with a lot of coaches and therapists and people going through who are running a business around sort of holistic coaching, accountancy, that type of thing. But this book is very different, and this is a book that needs to be in every home, but nobody should need it. And it's certainly something that I could have done with 6 years ago when my father unexpectedly passed away. And we talked today about some of the stories in the book. They're not necessarily in the book, but they're stories that can help with any PR or marketing. So Paul, as any good author would do, is now looking to get this message out to as many people as possible. He knows this book is going to help so many people who are going through a death of a loved one, and they don't know what to do next. And his book focuses on helping them through those next stages with, how do you arrange a funeral service? It does what it says in the tin, basically. And he was talking about the story of one of the, I think his name was George, who was in the book and who died aged 6 years old from leukemia. And this is a sort of story that is going to tug on those heartstrings. He was incredibly privileged to be chosen to deliver the funeral. He's got to know the family. He knows that they're on a mission. They've got a bigger mission. He's got a bigger mission. And actually, it's those stories that people really want to hear about, whether it's through, any of your story outside the book, or even the story inside the book. Not appropriate for this one, but, it's thinking about those stories and how they can really bring your book alive. So I hope you've enjoyed this series of Facebook Lives. There's so much more about you, your story, seeding in my new book, Becoming an Authority. If you've not taken a listen yet, do go to www.becominganauthority.co.uk. It's on audio. It's on like 40 audio bookstores worldwide. It's just a few quid, and 20% of the profits are going to charity as well, to the Romans Hospice, who my dad sadly never made it there. But my mum is a volunteer, which is one of the reasons why it's a charity really close to my heart. They do some amazing stuff. I really hope that none of us need that type of support, but actually I would love to support that charity even more. If you would like to learn more about how you can become an authority, you can share you and your story, you can make a bigger impact, you can get your message out to the world in a timely manner, do get in touch. I'd love to have a chat with you. Free, no obligation consultation with me, just to talk through your ideas, to sanity check them and make sure they have the wow factor and they do what you want your book to do. And if you've excuse me, got any questions, do let me know and pop them below. Let me know what you've thought and what insights you've had from this series of Facebook Lives and this one today. And if you've got any questions, I'll pop back on and answer them on a different day. I will see you soon. Bye for now.